The first night ended as you heard. The next morning, King Shahrzad, according to his daily schedule, went to the administrative department of his palace to deal with state affairs. Worried and restless, the minister was waiting to hear the news of the death of his lovely Shahrzad. King Shahrzad gave him a mysterious look, but he did not say a word and went about the affairs of the country and dealing with people's complaints like every day. It was evening and it was time for the king to call the minister and request to bring another young girl, but the king got up and walked towards the royal dormitory without saying a word. The minister returned home, amazed and hopeful. We also follow King Shahrzad to the royal dormitory. In the royal dormitory, Dunyazad was sitting next to Shahrzad and was anxiously waiting for the arrival of the king and was surprised by her sister's calmness. Finally, King Shahrzad arrived, 2 sisters stood up to respect him, and the king laid down on his bed and motioned them to sit down. Dunyazad turned to Shahrzad and said, "Sister, I pray you to finish for us the story of the merchant and the Ifrit." To this, Shahrzad answered, "With all my heart and as my duty requires, if the king permits." Then the king said, "You may speak." And she said, "O beloved king and lover of justice, it has been narrated that..." Ifrit was very surprised by this strange story, and the Sheikh of Deer continued, "My lord, my first wife was watching and said to me, 'We must sacrifice this calf, it has grown to perfection.' But, filled with great regret, I could not bring myself to sacrifice him, and the calf went to the butcher's house. The next day, when I was sitting at home, the butcher came to me and said, 'Master, I am telling you good news worthy of a reward.' I replied, 'Tell me.' Then he said, 'O merchant, my daughter is a witch, and she learned magic from an old woman who is staying with us. Yesterday, when you gave me that calf, I brought it into the presence of my daughter. My daughter was looking at it very carefully when suddenly she covered her face. So, she said to me, 'Dear father, why don't you let me know when you bring a stranger home so that I can wear appropriate clothes?' 'Where are these strange men?' I asked. She replied, 'This calf that you brought with you is the merchant's son, but he has been bewitched. Yes, both he and his mother are bewitched by his stepmother. Of course, I feel very sorry for the mother of this poor calf because she was killed by her father.' I was very surprised by these words of my daughter, and at sunrise, I hastened to tell you. After hearing the butcher's words, I ran to the butcher's house out of joy to see my son again. When I arrived at his house, his daughter greeted me kindly, and the calf came and rolled at my feet. Then I asked the girl, 'Is what you say about this calf true?' And she replied, 'Yes, master, indeed, he is your son, your pleasure.' Then I said, 'My kind girl, if you will hand over my son, I will give you all the cattle and property that your father keeps for me.' She laughed at my words and said, 'Master, I am willing to accept this fortune on 2 conditions. Firstly, that I marry your son, and secondly, that I will be allowed to bewitch and imprison whomever I please, so that I can fight your evil wife. Master, you should know that there are 2 groups of witches. The first group, like me, is trained to help people, but the other group is very dangerous. They possess black magic, very powerful and demonic magic, and this group is not allowed to fall in love with anyone, or even become a mother, because a mother loves her child, and the light of this love destroys the darkness and the curse of this magic. And don't ever think that your ex-wife bewitched your wife and child out of love for you. The jealousy and hatred of this woman have brought this disaster to your life, and if you do not capture her with her own weapon, you cannot get rid of her curse.' When I heard the girl's words, I felt sorry for the lost life and the love I had given to this woman, so I answered, 'Do whatever it takes, just bring my son back to me.' When the girl heard this from me, she took a small copper basin, filled it with water, and said magic spells over it. Then, she sprinkled water on the calf and repeated these words in a loud voice, 'If God made you a calf, stay a calf, and if you were bewitched, return to your former form by the grace of God Almighty.' Meanwhile, the calf began to tremble, and suddenly the calf disappeared, and my son returned to human form. I threw myself into his arms and apologized to him for the abuses he had seen, and then we both cried in sorrow for the loss of his mother. When we returned home with my son, we saw that there was no news of my ex-wife. We, who were mourning for my beloved wife, did not look for her and tried to arrange our lives. Days passed. After our hearts calmed down from the calamities that had befallen us, my son married that kind witch girl. This evil woman, who had found out about my son's marriage, came back to trick us again to make her way to my house, but the moment my son's wife saw her, she gave her no chance and bewitched her. And as you can see, this old dear is my ex-wife. Days, I take this poor dear to the desert to graze, and today, passing by here, I saw this excellent merchant. After asking him what he did and hearing what had happened, I sat down to watch the event. Then the Ifrit said, "Your tale is marvelous enough, and I grant you mercy for a third of this blood." After this, the second sheikh, the master of the two dogs, came forward and said, "O mighty Ifrit, if I tell you a story about these two hounds, who are my brothers, and if it is more wonderful than the story you heard, will you give me a third of this merchant's blood in return?" Ifrit replied, "Certainly, venerable sheikh, if your adventure is indeed more wonderful." The story of the second sheikh. So, the second sheikh began. "Know, O Lord of the kings of the Ifrit, that these two dogs are my brothers, and I am the third. When our father died, he left us 3,000 dinars. I opened a shop with my share and started doing business there. My brothers did the same, but soon one of them went into another business and was away from us for over a year. When he returned, he had lost all of his money. I was upset and said to him, 'Brother, did I not advise you not to go on this journey?' But he cried and said, 'Now that I have nothing left, your words will not help me.' I took him to my house and gave him beautiful, expensive clothes. Then I calculated the capital of my shop. I left the initial capital intact and divided any profit equally between me and my brother, and we lived together for many days. But in the end, both of my brothers decided to go on a second trip and wished for me to go with them. When I declined this invitation and pointed out that the result of the first trip did not tempt me to imitate them, they began to scold me. But their words were of no use, and we stayed in our shops for a whole year. At the end of each year, they offered to travel again, but I still did not accept, and this continued for 6 years. But finally, I agreed to their request to move with them and suggested that we should calculate how much money we have. We did so and saw that it reached 6,000 dinars in total. Then I said, "Let's hide half of this in the ground so that we have a backup in case of loss, and each of us will take 1,000 dinars to trade with." They also accepted. So, I took the money and divided it. I hid 3,000 dinars and divided the other 3,000 dinars among the three of us. Then we bought various kinds of goods, chartered a ship, put everything we had on the ship, and set off. After a month's voyage, we anchored in a certain city and sold our goods at a 10-fold profit. Then we left the city. When we reached the seaside, we saw a woman wearing very old and poor clothes, so much so that parts of her clothes were torn. The woman stared at us three brothers, and after a while, she approached me and said, "Can you help me and save me from this situation? I know how to repay your favor." I answered, "Of course I'll help you, it's my duty and you shouldn't feel like you have to repay." She said, "Then marry me, master, take me with you to your country so that I can give you my soul. However, I hope you are not ashamed of my poor condition." I answered, "Dear lady, as I told you, as a human being, I must help you. And marriage is not a game. I ask you to never marry for anything but your heart." Then I continued with humor, "Come with me now so we can buy you clothes quickly, otherwise, we will miss the ship." I bought her expensive clothes and prepared the best place on the ship for her, and I must admit that the woman became very beautiful after the change of clothes and rest. Over time, I fell in love with her and was not separated from her day and night, and I preferred his company over my brothers. This love became so intense that I proposed to her and we got married on the same ship. Unaware that my brothers were jealous of me because of my wealth and my wife's beauty, this jealousy reached the point where they plotted my death. One night, while my wife and I were sleeping, my brothers threw us both into the sea with the help of some crew members. On that dark night in the middle of the ocean, I was drowning and I could not see any trace of my wife. Suddenly, a creature that was half fish and half human hugged me and took me to an island. She left me there and disappeared. I sat on the beach and stared at the sea in despair. Finally, morning came and I saw my savior swimming toward the shore. Hoping that she had found my wife, I got up and went to her. But when I saw that my wife was not with her, my world became dark and I shouted, "Why did you save me?" I had to die next to my wife and I started crying. Suddenly, I heard the sweet voice of my wife, "You really didn't know me, my dear." I looked at the creature and thought to myself that I had gone crazy with grief. But she kindly said, "I am your wife and I am also a mermaid." I was so surprised that I could not speak. She continued, "I see you're confused. You have to know that we mermaids are not allowed to marry humans unless a human with a pure heart falls in love with us. I had seen you and I knew you were a very good human being, but your brothers are so filthy that they could not tolerate your happiness. They gave the crew a lot of money and you know the rest of story. Now I'm here to take you home, and then I go to your brothers and kill them." Still amazed by her words, I thanked her sincerely for saving my life. And I begged her not to kill my brothers. This time she was surprised and asked, "Why shouldn't I kill them?" I said, "If you do that, then what's the difference between us and them?" She thought a little and then said, "I will not accept. They are murderers and must die. Tonight I will sink their ship to die." I wanted to say something, but she closed my mouth with a kiss, and then she hugged me tightly and started to spin, at such a rate that I passed out. When I opened my eyes, I was on the roof of my house and she had disappeared again. I entered the house. I rested that night, and the next morning, I took the 3,000 dinars that I had hidden before the trip, opened my shop, and filled it again with new items. I wanted to tire myself so much that I wouldn't think about the fate of my brothers. I stayed in the shop until the end of the night, and then I returned home. Upon entering the house, I saw these two dogs tied in a corner. When they saw me, they got up and barked and pulled themselves to my clothes. At that moment, I saw my wife by the window. "These are your brothers," she said to me with a kind smile. I didn't want to break your kind heart by killing them, so I asked my sister, who is very skilled in witchcraft, for help. She changed them in this way, and they remained dogs for 10 years, and after 10 years, my sister sees them. If their hearts are empty of hatred and jealousy, she breaks their spell. O powerful Ifrit! Today, 10 years have passed since that incident, and I am going to my wife's sister to turn these poor creatures into human beings. I saw this good merchant when I came here, and after hearing his story I wished to stay and witness what happened between him and you. This is my story. Ifrit said. It was indeed a remarkable story. I will give you a third of this man's blood for that. Then Sheikh 3, the owner of the donkey, came forward and said to Ifrit, "O King of Kings, if the story of me and this donkey can make you wonder, is it possible for you to give me the rest of the blood of this good man?" Ifrit said, "I accept." The story of the third Sheikh. Third Sheikh said, "O great Ifrit, my story does not have the complexities of the stories of the previous two Sheikhs, but it has something very different that I will tell you. I was the governor of a city and people respected me a lot. Because of this job and to solve people's problems, I sometimes went on long trips, and one of these trips took longer than usual. But finally, I returned with success and a great achievement for my city. I reached the city in the middle of the night, and in order not to disturb my family, I entered the house quietly. I heard a voice from my bedroom. Thinking that it might be a thief, I opened the door violently. And at the end of my disbelief, I saw my wife laughing and happily making love to my assistant. An old man whose teeth had fallen out and always smelled bad of sweat and had been married many times, but no woman would tolerate him for more than a month. Seeing this scene stunned me so much that I couldn't even move. My wife took advantage of this and quickly picked up the container of water that was next to her and said strange words loudly and poured the water on me, and suddenly, black smoke swirled around me and I turned into a dog. Oh noble Efreet! This is the big difference between my story and my friends. I was suddenly no longer human. I swear that feeling is the weirdest and deadliest feeling anyone can have. And I had not yet recovered from these consecutive shocks that had been inflicted on me when this woman fell on me with a stick and kicked me out of my own house. You have no idea what a terrible difference the world you see from a height of 180 centimeters has with the world you see from a height of 50 centimeters. You don't know, nobody knows. I was so humiliated that I could not even commit suicide. How can a dog kill himself if he is not satisfied with his life? I used to search among the garbage for days to maybe find a piece of bone from the remains of human food, which I could not find most of the time, and I remained hungry. I had no shelter and my body was full of fleas from sleeping in the filthy ruins, and I could find no clean water to wash my body. Ah, noble Efreet, there is such a deep wound from those days on my soul that it may not be healed until the end of my life. I spent my days in this situation until one night, when I was walking in the streets looking for a place to sleep, I heard a scream and quickly ran towards that sound. I saw a jackal trying to steal a crow's chick that had fallen from the nest. And the mother of this chick, in defense of her child, screamed and attacked the jackal, but her strength did not reach her. Unconsciously, I started barking and attacked the jackal. The jackal, seeing me, quickly ran away, and the crow quickly caught its chick with its beak and took it into the nest. I went back to find a place to sleep when the crow flew and sat in front of me on a piece of stone and stared at me. I said, "If you mean to thank me, there is no need for that. I wish that instead of a jackal, there was a lion and it could kill me to get rid of this misfortune." But the crow didn't move, and staring at me, she said, "Son of man, I see that you have been captured." I looked at her in astonishment and said, "It is strange enough that I can talk to you, even more strange is that you know that I was human." The crow laughed and said, "This is the problem with you people, you think you know everything better than everyone else. I knew from your smell that you were a human trapped in a dog's skin. I have no interest in you humans, but you owe me today and I must repay you, so listen up and don't forget. When you go out of the city, you see many farms on both sides of the road. You have to go to the right to reach the 7th farm. 7 women are living on this farm who can dispel your curse. But you should not enter the farm without their permission. You have to wait for one of them to come out and let you in." The crow fell silent, stared at me again with its strange look, and suddenly flew away. I cried for joy, and that night I walked to the farm. After a few hours I found the farm and sat in front of it. O noble Efreet, I did not stir from the front door for 7 days, but no one came out. On the 7th day, I had no more blood left and I was ready to die. Just as I surrendered myself to death and was no longer waiting for anyone, 7 very beautiful women came out of the door with heavenly smiles and came toward me. They spread a small carpet on the ground and put me on it and took me into the field. They passed through 7 doors and left me next to a dream spring. Then they stood around the fountain, held hands, and began to sing a strange song, in a language I did not know. Their singing lasted for a long time, and then they washed my body with spring water. When I was completely clean, they put me on a carpet again and took me to the middle of the spring. Suddenly they released me and I fell into the water. all 7 people put their hands on my head and held me under the water. I was too weak to react. I just said in my heart, "Goodbye life," and passed out. When I opened my eyes, I saw 7 kind and concerned faces in front of me. I was alive. I was human again. I was screaming and crying with happiness. I later found out that I had spent 7 days in a coma. When the 7 sisters saw that I was fine, they brought me decent clothes and told me not to tell the people of my city what happened to me, because they would sympathize with me at first, but later they would make fun of me. Then they gave me a small container of water and said that the moment you see your wife, pour this water on her, and if you see her with a man, pour the water on both of them. Then they kindly prayed for me and I left them and returned to the city. I waited until it was night. I slowly climbed the wall and entered the bedroom. My wife was sleeping next to my unfaithful assistant. I silently poured water on them. The room suddenly filled with smoke, and when the smoke cleared, I saw that my wife had turned into a donkey and my assistant had turned into a little mouse. The mouse ran away in terror. I took the donkey and locked it in the barn. Today this donkey brought a lot of cargo to the village, and I saw this gentleman while returning from the village and heard his story. I decided to stay to see what would happen to him. This tale made Ifrit tremble with pleasure. Here, Shahrazad saw the dawn approaching and discreetly fell silent. Then her sister Dunyazad said, "Sister, your words are sweet, gentle, and pleasant to the taste." And Shahrazad answered, "Indeed, they are nothing compared to what I would tell both of you tomorrow night if I were still alive and the king thought it appropriate to spare me." At this, a king said to himself, "I will not kill her until I hear the rest of her remarkable tale." Dunyazad respected the king, kissed his sister and left them alone, wishing to see his sister again. We follow her and leave them alone in each other's arms. Until another night and another story.